I want to welcome you to the closing session of our NextGen Government Training Summit. I really can't believe it is already coming to a close, but we've saved, I like to think, the best for last. We have two incredible keynotes lined up to close out this year's summit. And I know for those of you that have been with us all day, you could probably recite these housekeeping items for me by heart. But for those folks that are just joining right now, I have a few housekeeping items to go over. But for those of you that have been here and who have heard the spiel before, go into the chat and tell me what's a learning moment you had today. What is something that you enjoyed, a speaker you enjoyed? Give me your feedback in the chat. Good, bad, we want to know it all. All right, but for those of you that are new, here are the housekeeping items. First, if you're on Twitter, please share what you are learning alongside us using the hashtag NextGenGov. We also have some great resources available for you to download on the right-hand side of this console, and that includes the slide deck with all the great info in it, so make sure you check those out. Of course, we want to make sure you have the most accessible time possible, so if you need the closed captioning feature, just look for the icon on the bottom right-hand side of the media player. That's where my face is showing up right now. And of course, we hope you don't have any technical difficulties, but they happen. And if they do, send us a message to that Ask a Question tab, and my colleague Maddie will make sure to get your questions answered. And it's in that same portal where you can ask our experts questions, and you're not shy, so don't be shy in the Q&A. Put your questions in early and often. And I mentioned it a second ago, but we do have that open chat available for you today. So throw in your thoughts, let us know what you're thinking and feeling, give us your feedback in real time. And of course, if you miss any tidbits, don't worry, we'll email you a link to the entire event tomorrow, so you'll be able to access all the sessions as well as the related resources. All right, with all of that housekeeping out of the way, I want to take a moment to thank all of our wonderful NextGen Alliance sponsors: American University School of Public Affairs, Blue Cross Blue Shield, WAEPA, Government White Papers, and Code for America. We literally could not put on this event without you all, so thank you all so much for your support. And last but certainly not least, we are giving out one CPE or continuing professional education credit for today's session. Here's how you're going to get that credit. You're going to stay on the whole time. You're going to take the 3 polling questions, and you're going to fill out the post-event evaluation. You do those 3 things, and we'll be sending you your CPE certificate. And with that in mind, we do have our first poll question up right now. And for our federal friends, you're probably going to recognize these. These are the different ECQs, or executive core qualifications. And we're looking for which one you are hoping to grow in the most. And so I'm going to give you a second to take that. And while you do, I want to introduce our closing keynote, our first closing keynote. That sounds a little contradictory, but it's accurate. And this closing keynote is called Why Public Service Matters, Lean into the Mission. And joining us to tell her story is Renee Wynn, who's the former Chief Information Officer for NASA. Renee, thank you so much for being with us today. All right, let's give the poll another few seconds here, and then we're going to give Renee the floor. I'm just looking over at the chat. Should I say or should I go? Really resonated with me. The financial webinar was popping. I saw a lot of people in that one. A lot of good information in there. We have got to make sure we are not only taking care of our career, but our financial wellness as well. All right, poll results are in, and we are pretty evenly split here in terms of all of these different areas, with leading change and building collaborations kind of eking it out there at the top, but really a close call there. All right, well, with that, Renee, I am going to hand the reins over to you.
Great. Thank you, Emily, and good afternoon, everybody, no matter where you are. Since you've been sitting in front of this screen for quite a while, why doesn't everybody just take a big, giant stretch and a big inhale and exhale? because I definitely learned in long days, if I'm not comfortable, it doesn't matter what y'all are saying to me, I'm not going to hear it. And I was very clear with my team many times going, we need to take a break. A lot of times it was a body break. So I would be like, I'll be right back. And I would just run down the hall because at the latter part of my career, there just wasn't that enough time in any given day. As I used to say to everybody, as the NASA CIO, when people ask me a lot of different questions, I said, listen, here's the best description I give you. After I've chosen the shoes to match my outfit for the day, I have lost control of the day. So be comfortable in the chaos, be comfortable with uncertainty, and you'll have a fine day because you're not fighting the uphill stream that everybody kind of throws at you. And things get thrown at you as well, like squirrels taking out power of the uninterrupted power supply on a main computer center in Stennis, which is where they do rocket testing, right? You're like, great, a squirrel, really? Really? We can put somebody on the moon? Well, we're trying to put somebody back on the moon, and yet we can't keep squirrels from taking out our power. But it's just part of the job. So a little bit about me in that. In one is my final position of record was the Chief Information Officer for NASA, where I provided IT services across the globe and off the globe. My team serviced some of the astronauts on International Space Station, and I was asked by the White House to lead the overhaul of NASA's cybersecurity posture, both across the globe as well as off the globe as well. And so I got a great opportunity to learn about complex mission systems and how do you put risk mitigation strategies in place and not disrupt the amazing cool science that happens, as well as don't disrupt or create an international incident, since the International Space Station has representatives from across the globe serving on it, including Russia. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well, because I had the pleasure of going to Russia and Kazakhstan for 2 weeks for a launch, and it was a cool experience, but it was also very awakening in terms of my cybersecurity responsibilities, and should have made me run and hide, but it didn't, because you know what? If you're a public servant, you do hard, and I know that from you guys. So in the chat, while I'm just going on and on here, please, you guys put in there, why do you like public service? Because I'm going to talk about my public service experience, and I'm going to tell you the good parts. I may squeeze in a few of those parts of, boy, what am I doing here? We'll take it from here. So your opportunity for programs like this was many. I also got an opportunity to participate in programs like this as well. And one of the real benefits that came of it, not just from the content, because that's the obvious, but I would walk away with at least 2 or 3 people that I would consider in my network. And nowadays, the tools that you have available to be your network, it's much easier to stay in contact. And so I really encourage you, in addition to the learning you're doing, work on that network. You should be able to solve any challenge that comes across your desk in 3 phone calls, 3 texts, or 3 emails, or a combination of 1 from each of those, or whatever combination it is, because then at some point in your career, actually every point in your career, you are solving and you'll always need help. And so when I did environmental policy, I'd call on hydrogeologists and lawyers. I even got to call on unexploded ordnance experts to many ways help us write a policy, but then give me a quick tutorial about what was it like to be a detonation expert, besides something I would never do. And that, so my story begins in the federal government, as I never wanted to be a public servant. My dad worked for NASA, but my dad didn't have the cool job. My mom had the cool job. She worked for a national security agency, and she was covert operations for the United States government. So my mom was a spy, and she is featured in the Cryptological Museum at the National Security Agency for the work that she did for equality for all, I would just point out. But she was a cryptologist. I never knew. I learned a lot about my mother after she died at her funeral, and she passed away about 33 years ago. And that's when I learned she was fluent in languages. I knew she was fluent in German because We would sometimes speak German together, but I never knew the other language she was fluent in until she died. Because tell me, the last time you went to a Bulgarian restaurant and the person next to you orders it in perfect Bulgarian, right? You just don't know about people, and that was my mom. So I saw their jobs, and I guess they were cool, but I didn't think they were cool. They were my parents, and so I was focused on. I went to private school. I got scholarships to go to school, and I was focused on money. Get me a high-paying job, and that's going to be the answer to everything. I was wrong. I was absolutely wrong. When I got a job with a consulting firm, Booz Allen, and their client was EPA, and I went on my first on-site visit, almost instantaneously, wow, why wouldn't I want to go to work every single day to do my part to provide this nation with clean water, clean air, safe chemicals, land that is being used in a way that doesn't make me sick, right? And then work on scientific breakthroughs, and so we can be more sustainable in what we're doing and how we are as humans on the planet. And it was instantaneous. So a couple of years after joining Booz Allen, I was a environmental protection employee, agency employee, and I never looked back. And I couldn't believe when I got to my 20-year mark, I went, what just happened? But in that 20 years, a lot of people put trust in me, probably trust I didn't even have for myself, and they just threw me into hard. It's like, it's just jump in to the back end. So all the women on here, when you read a job qualification, don't think of it as a checklist. Don't say, yes, I can do that. Oh, maybe I'm not so good at building coalitions, so I'm just not going to check that box. But man, I can lead change, project management, etc. If you believe, if a friend tells you that you are 75% there, drop your name in the hat. Plain and simple. A lot of guys, and I'm not saying, and this is generalization, so I know this is like being really risky, will look at it and they'll see that I am 70, they'll see themselves as 75, 60% covered. So why not try? And that should be your attitude for new projects. Why not try? Ask for help, pull together the team. You guys chose in the poll that building collaborations is really building coalitions to get really hard stuff done. Those are absolutely critical in any job you will ever have. You don't, you seldom do things alone unless you really want to. And at which point, by all means, go. I am one for just like, no, nobody bother me right now. I'm having fun by myself. Nobody's telling me what to do. No one's telling me how to do it. And no one's asking for millions of dollars from me right now. So this is really good. So I opened with some advice to sort of set the stage and a little bit about my background, because I was flying away from public servant and I retired after 30 years. And in that time, I said yes to hard things. And I also was pushed from the behind from my bosses, and not to say we need you to do that. And one fateful day was one of those projects I was trying to avoid. Like, who wants to lead the negotiation against the Department of Defense on how to clean up unexploded ordnance in property that is likely to leave the United States government custody and control? I was like, what is an unexploded ordnance? What do you want to do? Where you want to do that? And my boss's wife conveniently had a baby, and he says, I'm taking paternity leave. This was when that was unheard of. And he says, I'll be back in a couple of months, and we really need to advance this because the base closure program, we want to allow property to go back into the hands of the community for economic viability in the future, especially when the bases are closing around them. I'm like, oh, okay, great. And my first negotiation was days later to lead the whole team. So I basically took his chair, and I had lawyers and hydrogeologists, and we had explosives professionals were from obviously the Department of Defense. And so that summer, plus a couple of months, I led the negotiations to establish the principles of how the United States government, the whole government, was going to address the unexploded ordnance that would remain behind when a base closure property was going to leave the custody and control of the United States government. So when you talk about Vieques in Puerto Rico and taking that little kayak ride where things glow in the dark, yes, I'm quite aware of those glow in the dark things. Some of those are natural. Some of them are man-made, but it's still safe to do that. And so it was an opportunity, right, where I was like, yeah, you run with this, I'll take my stuff over here. And then my boss was out. And so that could happen to you, right? You're working in partnership with somebody, or you're really just saying, yeah, you go nuts, you go do that thing. And then something lands in your lap, and your answer should be yes, because you never know what it's going to do for you. What did I learn? I learned how to negotiate hard stuff. Right? How do you balance? This is a multi-trillion-dollar cleanup bill. Why should taxpayer money go to trillions of dollars towards that versus trillions of dollars towards something else? So we tried to come up with principles that were common sense and really did allow for the communities to have economic viability once the Department of Defense left them. So it was a real balancing principle in there. I learned a lot of technical stuff. I went out and I saw detonation chambers in parking lots at American University, because that's where they were at the time. And so you're like, really, we can blow stuff up, and like, there's a house, and oh, there's a parking garage over there. I can see all of this stuff. But what's cool is what technology can do for you and in support of public service. So go ahead and do hard, embrace it, ask for help, learn, read, tour, watch YouTube videos. Whatever you need to do to gain that comfort, go for it, because it is from that I learned communication skills. I learned how to pull and keep a team together. I learned how to have hard conversations with people that I felt weren't behaving appropriately for a negotiations situation. We had to semi-withdraw from the negotiations because legislation was dropped that hadn't been coordinated with the committee. So we had to send a very strong message of, I'm sorry, this is a partnership and you just did what? We will be excusing ourselves from the table. And part of that is a bit showmanship, but part of it is a tactic to say, if I'm building trust with you and to do something that we think is going to be good for the public, don't go around my back. You can always give me a heads up, because a lot of times in big institutions, the right hand and the left hand, they're never talking, which is what the situation was, but it was an important message to send in terms of communication. And on the topic of communication, how does one person who did environmental policy and has a Bachelor of Arts in Economics, all this you can find online about me, end up at the most iconic agency of the federal government, leading a very technical area, right? The global and off the globe IT operations and cybersecurity? Well, perhaps while I was at EPA, I spent a little bit of time chatting with how the IT services were doing. Maybe not so good. And from those conversations, basically folks said, why don't you go over and be the deputy CIO of EPA? And that's when I was pulled in and out of mission into the IT operations. And I really grew to love operations. I love the chaos. I love the lack of, yeah, wow, it's already 7 p.m. I vaguely remember breakfast, right? I loved the operations. And it was from there that I decided I wanted to be better at that, and no better place to go than such an expansive, iconic agency than to go over to NASA to do that. And so I mentioned before, so I went over to NASA in 2015. And while I'm speaking here today, I have my little buddy from Mars. I was there helping a lot for our Mars launch, right, where we put the new rover, Curiosity, on there, and the first ever helicopter on another planet, Perseverance. That launch was in July of 2020. So my team and I supported that effort. I was gone by the launch, but I watched it closely, and I keep Mars here in my office. In fact, I have a lot of these little plush planets all over the house. I give them away to my nieces and my son, and they're all adults, by the way, because every year I feature Focus on Another Planet. In 2020, everybody got Mars because, well, we were going back to Mars with another rover and a helicopter. So who wouldn't love that? Well, understanding NASA's complex mission took a lot of effort on my part. And one of the things that they did is I asked and I was invited to go to a human, an astronaut launch out of Kazakhstan, which is the only place we were doing it the entire time that I was at NASA. Commercial crew, which you see now with SpaceX, was in development, but had not yet launched its first time. That was also in 2020. And I watched that on television. And of course, if you're from NASA, you do correct everybody's wrong things that they talk about space. So never watch some space stuff with me because I'm like, that is so wrong. That does not work. Who'd they get to consult on this thing? Because I know that that's wrong. I'll go Google it to make sure that I'm right in all of that. And so I was invited to do that. And why did that matter? Because not only at NASA is an internet provider, they are the e-route provider, and that was done out of my organization. And we are launching in a highly geopolitical sensitive area, which is called Russia. And at the time, Kazakhstan was part of, Baikonur, Kazakhstan was part of Russia. So I went over there to see how things were done and see how our data are processed in another country and figure out how to make sure that as working with the astronaut office in the International Space Station office, making sure that our data that comes back across the globe is secure and that the integrity is where we expect it in order for us to make discoveries or in order for us to make engineering decisions based on what's going on. So it was neat to go there, and I got to sit across the table from the head of Roscosmos, the former head of Roscosmos. He was his tenure ended just after Russia invaded Ukraine for a variety of reasons. And I just leaned into hard, right? I told you we do this. And I just asked him, so how is cybersecurity for you guys? And he and I had a conversation, a Russian, with cybersecurity and protecting space assets, because we are co-located in space and there are no boundaries in space like humans have put boundaries down here on Earth. So it was a neat thing to be able to do that. And I learned a ton. I got to see, I had a team in Russia, so I got to meet them and really see how they need to operate both securely and appropriately in an environment such as Russia. And that, so we were able to also make a few changes to address some significant risks associated with cybersecurity while operating there. So as I close, because I do want to allow maybe one question here, and that is in all of this, go ahead and embrace what is hard. Your mindset needs to be, I can try, and that you need to be able to ask for help. And I want to thank each and every one of you for your public service. As somebody who resides in a local government, who resides in a state, and worked for the federal government, I know that you are working really hard for the benefit of the public. And I personally believe there's no better way to go to work than with your heart. So now we'll take a question in the attendee chat. I probably should ask for it a little bit sooner. So the first person that gets something in and I see that, because we definitely want to make sure that Demetrius, who is a fellow native of Washington like I am, he gets an opportunity to address you guys as well. So I'll also pose is you never know where your journey is going to take you. And if you say yes, you'd be really surprised at where it can take you.
I love that. Well, thank you, Renee. You have given me a lot to think about, and not the least of which is that detonations are happening at American University, where I went.
Not now. That program ended. The good news is we got done what we needed to done. But yeah, there was a little one right there in the parking lot.
I'm gonna have to go back and consult everyone. Anywho, though, I'm going to sneak in two questions for you. And the first is, and I think this is a really honest question. The question is, what was your motivation to leave? So obviously you have now left NASA, you've left government, you put in a lot of work and time in that, and that is totally responsible. But just curious, how did you make the decision that now is my chance to kind of do something new?
Yeah, they say it illuminates for you, and it did. So I had led 2 transformation projects. So that leading change that they voted for, absolutely. I led a bunch of change at EPA, and then partially why NASA liked me to become their next CIO was because I had led significant
Mm-hmm.
change at EPA. And there was a third phase to the change that I was leading. We thought it was only a 2-phase effort, but it turns out there was a very needed third phase. And I had estimated that it would take 2 to 3 years to do that. I knew in my mind that wanted to retire about 2 years from 20. So I was thinking about
Mm-hmm.
more like 2022. And I could not, in all consciousness, make the challenging decisions to transform an agency again. And this is digital transformation.
Mm-hmm.
This is budget. This is people. This was really hard stuff. I didn't think it was fair to an agency that if I couldn't stay for the duration of the decisions to the smooth landing, which it never is a smooth landing, which is now turns out it's 4 years because of COVID and that, I couldn't see myself staying for all of that. So I did not believe that I should be making the initial decisions.
Fair enough. All right. Last question for you. Your theme here was try. And I think that's such an important one, especially when you were talking about, having 70% of the qualifications, maybe not 100%. And I think for at least myself, I can't speak for anyone else, I 100% ascribe to that notion, because sometimes if I don't think I can do it 100% perfectly right, I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I can do this at all. But so much is learned in those growth opportunities and the ability to put yourself out there. But the questions here are about kind of the bravery needed in order to do that. So the question is, were you ever nervous about any of these opportunities? And if so, how did you combat that?
I was constantly nervous. I would tell people I felt like a cat with a long tail in a room full of rockers all the time. I mean, I've had 6 congressional hearings, 4 of which were for NASA. 2 of which I volunteered to be a friend of the House Oversight and Government Reform and House Oversight Committee, and so you just are. And so this is where it becomes really important. So I had 22 people working for me. It was critical that I understood the people that worked for me, what they did well, what they didn't do well, and have those challenging conversations, because I'm not doing this alone. And I had a few trusted advisors, both in my organization, which is a little hard to do, but I was comfortable with who I was, saying, you've been here, you know this place. Yes, I am your boss, but you need to tell me what's going on here, because I can't read the tea leaves. And I did the same thing outside of my organization. There was a wonderful woman in the mission support directorate and a couple of folks in the mission I'd go to and go, I don't know up from down. Why is this happening? And they would sit me down. They'd explain history. They'd explain that. And by hearing what others had to say, it would come together for me with all of my experience, what needed to be what I thought needed to be done. But I'd pull it from my team. I'm like, I'm the decision maker this many times, because if I'm the decision maker more, then my people are losing accountability for the areas that they're in charge of. So they have to make those decisions. My decisions are this many, and you have to force that issue, but you always just seek advice. You don't have to have the answers. You just have to have good people that you can go to have heart-to-heart conversations and really hear them. But I always was, even the day I left, when we were pivoting towards, I delayed my retirement to help settle things for into COVID. And I asked everybody, are you okay if I go now? I delayed already. What's 4 more months? What's 6 more months? It doesn't matter to me. It mattered more to me to leave the place better and make sure that the people that trusted me to lead trusted me when I left.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right.
Don't seek the comfort, right? That's what night when you go to sleep, that's about the only place I was ever comfortable. Maybe out for a run. I would a lot of runs in that, but you're not seeking comfort, you're seeking effectiveness and bringing people to help solve problems.
I love that. All right. Well, Renee, I could pick your brain for hours, but I'm going to let you go. But thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us and for 30 years of incredible public service. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Now over to you, Demetrius. They are a great audience and do that. And somebody did ask if I'd ever go back, and I get asked the question quite a bit, and I left the coolest job in the United States government. So if I went back, I'd probably go back as a political appointee instead of a civil servant. Yeah. Right.
Fair enough.
Right. Good, good. All right. Thank you, everybody. And you make it a great one.
All right.
Bye-bye.
So we've got our second poll question up right now, and we want to know, do you expect to still be in government in 3 years? And like Renee mentioned here a second ago, we do have our closingest of keynotes here with Demetrius Parker, who's the founder of the Trust Leadership Collective. And he is going to be talking about how to network as effectively as we possibly can. So I'll give you a few more seconds here to answer this poll, and then I'm going to hand things over to Demetrius. But I'm curious, Demetrius, while we wait for these poll results here, about your why for public service. Do you have a good why for me? And I'm putting you right on the spot. So
yeah, no. Thank you. Actually, I have a really good why. So all my life, again, as Renee shared, fellow Washingtonian, born and raised in DC, and so my first foray into public service was as a veteran of the United States military, in the Army, where I actually had the pleasure of being a presidential escort for the first Bush. Actually, I worked with him twice as a presidential escort, and then Bill Clinton's first inauguration was my last job as a presidential escort. But for me, it was all about giving back. Again, doing things for the betterment of the country and for what I had grown up with and what that looked like for me. And so public service has always been a big piece. And after the military, I went into entertainment for a while. Then I went into the private sector. And in those spaces, I always felt that there was something missing. And so about 10 and a half years ago, I decided to go into local government, where I spent, like I said, 10 and a half years in local government, because it's just a piece of who I am. And I feel it's an important thing for us to do, right? It was an honor and privilege to serve in the military. It was an honor and privilege to serve in local government, and especially to all of you that are in local government. No, nothing against the federal and state, but those who are in local government, I feel that's where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
You get to see how you are truly affecting your neighborhoods and your communities. And so I spent time there. And even now as a consultant, I do a lot of work with the local governments across the nation to help them be the best that they can be. So yeah, so that's that.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
All right, so you're closing us out, teaching us how to network. So I'm going to hand it over to you, sir.
Oh, thank you. And again, thanks to Renee, thanks to Emily and NextGen. This has been awesome. I can't say I'm as cool as Renee, but hopefully I can give you some good information about networking and why it's important. And so let's grab a coffee. So why are we looking at it and from a coffee standpoint and breaking it down? And so when I think about it, there's a lot of us who, like, our objective is to show, Kelly says, the importance of informal meetings. So a lot of times, those of us who are not extroverts like myself, we find it hard networking with people at conferences and locations where there's a lot of people. And at the same time, networking is so important. And I think Renee touched on this earlier when she was chatting about, having that network and having to be able to, 1 or 2 or 3 phone calls away, be able to get an answer. And that happens when you have a network. And so building networks is so important. And so I want to share some information with you from a small, or I guess a more intimate way of looking at how to build your networks. And so from a coffee, sitting in a coffee shop, when I say coffee, it could be any beverage, right? But we are going to talk about coffee a little bit and say, why coffee? Well, first of all, it's accessible. It's easy to arrange, generally affordable. It can be professional, but not formal. When you have that meeting, it can be perceived as a friendly gesture of like, hey, can we grab a coffee? Right? Can we grab a tea? Can we grab a hot chocolate? Can we grab a soda? Whatever that may look like, but it can be professional and at the same time, not formal. And then believe it or not, 65% of Americans report drinking coffee within the last day or so. Right? And so it's something that people do. So when you're inviting folks to do that, you know that the majority of people do it. So it makes it a little simpler for you. There's over $12 billion that are spent each year in that space. And so again, and I'm sharing a lot of data because I know we have some data folks. People are like, well, prove it to me, right? So I'm gonna share some data with you. And 3 cups per day is what the average coffee drinker drinks. So again, if you think about that 3 cups a day, that means there's different opportunities for you to invite someone. It doesn't have to be in the morning, doesn't have to be in the afternoon. It could be, if you think about 3 cups, hopefully you're not drinking 3 cups back to back in the morning, because that would be quite a bit. And yes, I don't know how someone with their heart rate would look like if they did that. But 3 cups a day, which means there is an opportunity to invite them any time of the day to say, hey, let's go get a cup of coffee and let's chat, right? I would love to chat with you. I would love to get to know you a little bit better and share a bit about myself. And then, of course, there's also tea, right? And 80% of American households have tea in them. And so that means people are drinking tea. And it's $85 billion that's spent in that space and 3.9 billion gallons of tea that have been drank per year. So again, the opportunities are there. And I just want to share those stats with you so that you understand what that looks like. So let's talk about it, right? What does it look like? Why we maximize, why we talk about networking? And so it's important that we are networking, again, almost like Renee shared, so that we have those connections so that we can get to answers a lot quicker, because we don't know everything. We have to own that. We don't know everything. I know I don't know everything. And my networks are very important to me. It's very important. It's been important to me when I was in sales. It's very important to me when I was a recruiter. It's very important to me in the OD HR space. And then it's important to me now as a consultant, because a lot of times folks will come to me and say, hey, do you know someone who's this? Or do you know the answer to that? And a lot of times I don't know the answer, but I can go to someone in my network, and within 2 to 3 emails, chats, whatever that may be, text messages, I can get an answer for someone. And so then from a perspective of building a reputation as someone who can get answers, that's another reason why you want to network, right? That, hey, you know what? They may not know the answer, but they know how to get to it. And so that helps us to be not only more efficient with the work that we're doing, especially in government, but also effective, right? So efficient and effective. And those are 2 things that I love to hear both of those at the same time, and not just, efficient and not just effective. How can I do both? And being there, and I like to share that I feel because of my network, I have been able to do the things that I've been able to do in my career, in local government as well as the entertainment business. I mean, when I left the United States Army and I decided to go into entertainment, I had done some modeling before, but I didn't have a vast network and I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't have vast experience, and I only had a couple people that I knew that were in that industry. And so, but I reached out to them, and as well as a few people who I didn't know, but I knew that they were in the industry, and I reached out and I said, hey, I would love to get a meeting with you. And, just being honest, coming from the military, I didn't have a lot of money. And so the thing that I could afford to do was take them for a cup of coffee. And I was like, hey, would you meet with me? And I would love to just talk to you about the industry and my aspirations for being in that industry. And several folks took me up on that. And so at that time, we're talking, talking about a long time ago. But at that time, I got to share with them my aspirations and my passion around why I want to be in the entertainment industry. And they got to share with me just their know-how. And then they opened up their networks and they invited me to auditions and they invited me to meet with other people. And so I was able to break into that industry, do the things that I was looking to do, and it only cost me a few cups of coffee, some conversations, the opportunity to, or I would say the openness to share what it was that I was seeking. And so, and to do that, what I had to do was, I had to prepare. I had to research, these people and their backgrounds and what it was that they did. I had to prepare thoughtful questions, like what questions am I going to ask them? So again, I'm not wasting their time. I had to have some clear objectives for the meeting. Why are we meeting? What is it that I'm trying to accomplish? And those things helped a lot. It helped a lot for me to be able to have them feel like, okay, this guy's not wasting my time. And so I did that when I was trying to go into the entertainment industry. And then, of course, when I was ready to say, you know what, I don't know if this is really going to pay my bills and get me into a space that I really get into. And so when I decided to go into the private sector, I did the same thing. Right? I did my research. I thought about what it was that, where did I want to work? Where did I want to go? What was that going to look like for me? And so I reached out to folks that were in some of those industries. And again, can I get a meeting with you? Can I check with you about, this is what I know about this industry, but I would love to learn from an expert like yourself. And those folks were like, yeah, I would love to get together with you. And again, when you're thinking about this very casual and informal, but yet professional space, they felt like, it was even a part of their job. So they didn't feel like they had to take time off from work to meet with me because they were talking about work. And so then they would do that and they would meet with me and we would chat about, again, their space and how they were doing things in their space. And it really gave me a lot of insight. And honestly, there was even a couple of spaces where I was like, ooh, maybe I don't want to be in that space because I don't know if it's actually going to fit what I'm looking to do. So when I was first kind of making that transition from the entertainment business into working in the private sector, part of it honestly was with the Secret Service. And so I reached out to folks, and some of the folks I had met while I was a presidential escort, but then some of those folks I met later doing this networking space. And, they would share things with, when you first come in, you're not going to be what everyone thinks is the cool one, like with the suits and all that. Like, no, there's a uniform version of this job and you're going to have to do that. And because you're going to be the new person, you're going to probably have to take the late shift and you're going to probably have to work late at night. And I was like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want my late nights, because at the time I was still young and I was still somewhat still in the entertainment business. And I wanted to be able to do the things that I wanted to do. And so I was like, maybe not, right? So again, I learned even things from networking of what I didn't want to do based on where I was at that time in my life. And so I think just networking is really important. But how we do is important, right? We have to understand that when we're networking with people, when we're meeting with people, that they're taking their time to meet with us and to share their knowledge. And I would tell you, most people love to share their knowledge. So that's another thing of, when we talk about be brave and do the hard thing, sometimes for some of us, reaching out to others is a hard thing to do. And so do that, right? Take that chance, because believe it or not, most people love sharing things about themselves. It's just that a lot of times we don't ask. So when someone does take the time to ask them to share about themselves, they're willing to do that. So do it. But again, make sure you do your research, make sure you understand what it is, you have thoughtful questions, and you have some clear objectives of what it is that you're trying to achieve. And so some conversation starters that you can have, right? So just to help you out, and again, I love tools, is asking, what inspired you to choose your current career path, right? And that's a really good question that you can start off with, that people would love to jump in and share. Or here's what got me here. Here's what I was thinking. And for some people, you'll find out some people fell into their careers. They just happen to be doing one thing, and then for whatever reason, they end up being introduced to something else, and it became, or they realized that was the thing that they really wanted to do. I know for me, I have 20 plus years in the HROD space, and it kind of was thrust upon me. I was with an organization, there was 7 of us, and I remember we got 2 big contracts, and at the time I was the sales director, and I remember the owner looked at me and said, "All right, Parker, well, you helped us get the people. You helped us get the projects, now you need to help us get the people." And I had no clue what that meant, but I had to lean in hard and figure out what it meant. And as I started to do that, it made me really realize how much I loved that space, right? And so with that, I leaned into my networks again, and I asked folks, hey, what does it look like to be in this space? Where should I be? What classes should I take? So many questions that I had to help me with this new mission that was laid upon me, that I was embracing, but I had to lean into it, and I had to use my network. And I know for some people, I'm looking at the chat, and someone's like, networking makes me running hot. And I get it. But this is I feel it's a safer way to be able to do that, because again, you're not in these big spaces where, it's hundreds of people or thousands of people sometimes at some of these conferences. And, it's more of you are one-on-one. It's more, if I dare say, intimate, right? But it's this personal relationship that you're starting to build with this person. And again, trying to find out more about them. So making it about them, that's also going to help you. And so then I would ask, are there any projects that you're currently working on that you're excited about, right? Because again, you're trying to get them to, talk about themselves and share what it is that they're working on, right? Which allows that person to share their professional endeavors and interest. And then, I would ask questions, how do you usually overcome challenges at work? And a lot of this is for me to understand what it is about them and how they're doing, but it also gives me insight to some of the direction that I can go in that can help. And it also lets me know, hey, here's something that I can actually maybe help them with. Because I also feel that when we're networking with folks, when we're building relationships are two-way. And so it shouldn't be a thing where I'm just getting something, right? I want to be able to offer something as well. So if you were able to be in the session earlier when I was talking about mentoring and coaching, it's that same mindset of this two-way relationship, and understanding that when we are at work, we spend most of our time at work. And so these are relationships. And so we have to think about it that way. And so I'm just reading that someone said, I tend to do the same organically. However, I do introduce myself. Yeah, right. And you can do it organically. So that is another way to network, right? And so, but what I would probably say is, I think a lot of times extroverts have that ability or that openness to do that more organically, because they just they want to chat and they want to, engage with folks. And then some of us some of the folks that are on that introvert side do not do that as much as I saw in the chats with some folks, like, I just want to run and hide. And so, just understanding what it is that you're doing and the why, and the importance of networking, like how it is important that we understand and we connect with one another. So, how do you usually overcome challenges? Again, a good question. How do you think of, this industry, right? Our industry, how would it change in the next 5 years? And what does that do? That gives you, again, an opportunity to hear from an industry expert of what they think, and then also kind of share what you think, and then give you some direction of, well, maybe I might want to go here, because if the industry is changing, if you think about AI, and if we've been talking with someone 5 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever that looked like, you'd be like, ooh, I see the industry changing. I'm going to put more time and effort in this AI space and learn more about that, so that maybe that's going to be my expertise, my area to be a subject matter expert. And then a great question to ask is, what's the best career advice you've ever received, right? And so not even say given, but what is the best career advice you ever received? Because, and I think I shared this earlier, my grandma has this adage, a wise person learns from their mistakes, but a wiser person learns from the mistakes of others. And so if you think about that, and having, someone say, what's the best advice you've given or been given? And then I can learn from that and say, oh, wow, you know what? I can apply that same advice to my life and the way that I see things. So again, just some ways to think about it. And then I would also say, when you think about networking, think about what does your network look like from a diversity standpoint. When I say diversity, right, I don't mean just race and gender. I mean just levels of education, where they're from in the country, right? So the fact that, is great. I'm definitely going to connect with Renee as a fellow Washingtonian, connected with Emily, but then Emily has that space that she's from Ohio. And so what does that look like? And spreading my network and having someone from that Midwest space, or my folks that are on the West, because all those different regions, we think differently, we act differently. And so a lot of times they can come in, they can challenge some of the assumptions that I may have about particular things and make things so much more, or navigate those complex areas. And so I love, again, having a very diverse network, and there's such a benefit of doing that as well when you're thinking about networking and being more intentional about what my network looks like. So with that, want to have time for some questions. And so if you have any questions about networking, I did put my contact information in the chat. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Again, I love having folks in my network and introducing folks to other folks and being able to share resources and all those things. And at the same time, if you have any specific questions, I would love to answer them.
All right. Demetrius, thank you so much. And of course, everyone should grab coffee with him, both virtually and non-virtually, because we can't do a session about networking and then not include our contact information. So thank you so much for doing that, Demetrius. So 2 quick questions for you.
All right.
The first is, there are a lot of folks in here who are working remotely. So
yes,
perhaps the ability to actually physically meet with someone in person might not be there, or it might not be as easy. What advice do you have for networking in the digital realm?
Yeah, no, and I think we kind of segued into that with like me putting my LinkedIn in there, right? That's a great space. No, seriously, like I tell folks, that's what LinkedIn is about, is that networking. And it just, I let everybody know, LinkedIn does not pay me. I do not have a sponsorship from them, even though I probably should connect with someone there.
Yeah.
But I have found that to be such a great tool for doing exactly that, especially since we've been in this virtual space of being able to still reach out to people. And again, be polite, understand that you are, you're coming into their space. So be polite and say, hey, I would love to get a few minutes of your time. And I do it a lot with folks. So yeah, so that would be my way of doing it virtually. And then there's also other platforms that are out there that you can do the same thing.
Yeah, Okay, final question, and I know we've got a ton of questions in here, so these are all good follow-up questions, but there was a good one here on being, I'm going to call them the networky, right? Like, we're talking here, I want to meet you, Demetrius, because I want to pick your brain about your career and blah, blah, blah. But being you and being your awesome self, you're probably getting pinged quite a bit, and that can take a lot of time. It can take a lot of energy. How do you handle being on the opposite side of handling some of those requests? Like, where do you prioritize? How do you put in the right amount of effort here when you obviously want to network and grow as much as possible, but you got work, you got family, you got a lot of other commitments going on. You just can't be sitting at a Starbucks all day.
No, you can't. And at the same time, thank you. That's actually a great question. And you can't say yes to everything. And at the same time, I feel like it's part of my, when I think about service, right? I even look at networking as servitude. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I have certain days and times where I'm like, I'm going to do some networking when folks have reached out to me. I'm going to connect with them on these days. So sometimes I'll make sure that I try to respond to everyone, but I'll let them know, just and being honest, I'm really busy right now, but I can do it here. Or, here's my times, what does this look like for you? And again, I really also look at the folks who, when they're reaching out to me, who's being respectful, who seems like they really know, like this is not gonna, like they're not trying to get me in their place and then start selling me Avon or something. Nothing against Avon. But right, they're not gonna start trying to sell me on some multi-level marketing scheme or something like that. So I really look at how much time they put into the message that they sent to me to connect and what that looks like. And are they connecting with other people? Like, is it something that I feel like they got one connection on LinkedIn and I'm like, so that's what I do.
I love it. All right. Well, maybe we'll make it a competition for our attendees. See how many folks can reach out to other people on today's call and bump up your LinkedIn connections for sure, because that's what we are at the end of the day. We're a community and we're growing and we're learning from each other. So let's lean into that philosophy and really do it. Thank you so much, Demetrius. Really appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. Each one teach one, right?
I love it. I love it. All right. A few quick reminders, and then we'll get to your final poll here before we log off. But I wanted to take a second here to talk about our NextGen Public Service Awards. So these are our annual awards that we do that are really focusing on highlighting what I like to call the doers in government, the folks who are really on the ground, our project managers, program managers, IT directors, HR folks. The job title doesn't matter, but you're the folks who are out there really, really working hard to make your missions impactful for the communities that you serve. And we want to highlight you. And so our nominations are officially open as of today. Drum roll, surprise, excitement. And you can find that in the Resource Center right now. The more folks you nominate, the better off we're all going to be, because these are truly incredible stories and we want to get them out and share them. And speaking of being a community and sharing things together, I hope you all have enjoyed our NextGen experience today. And I'm just curious, this is our final poll. Are you going to be back in October for our second half of the summit? And while you answer that poll, I just want to give you kind of 5 things to think about as you leave today. The first is that you are exactly where you need to be in this moment. And so please remember to enjoy the space between where you are and where you go, because the journey is oh so very important. Second, the government needs you. It needs people like you who will shape and transform the government for better. We need you now more than ever before. So thank you so much for the hard work that you are doing. Third, trust yourself. You know more than you think you do, and your voice matters. So please, please, please use it. We want to hear from you. And remember that you are powerful and strong and that you're capable, and don't ever never let people tell you otherwise. And finally, you've got this. You survived shutdowns and continuing resolutions and political uncertainties and a pandemic and so many other things. And you're stronger and smarter for it. So here's to making the best of the remainder of 2024. And I hope you all will be back to join us in October. We really want to be part of the process, and we couldn't do that without our wonderful NextGen Alliance partners. So join me in thanking our sponsors one last time, because without them, well, NextGen just simply wouldn't happen. Our NextGen Alliance partners are Blue Cross Blue Shield, WAEPA, GovEvents, American University School of Public Affairs, which apparently had bombs, who knew, and Code for America. Thank you all so much for making NextGen a reality. And I know you've seen a few of our GovLoop faces here today as your moderators, but there is a whole organization behind NextGen, and I would be remiss if I did not appreciate them and their efforts to put the summit on. So to Maddie, John, Leah, Karina, Jessica, Eric, Casey, Caitlin, Blake, Callista, Andrew, Julia, Candace, Kelly, Lauren, Megan, Mark, Doug, and Susan, thank you for helping us put on NextGen today. And from all of us to all of you, thank you so much. Go out and do great work, and we'll hopefully see you back here in October. Bye, everybody.